All right, welcome back. I am going to go through a practice assessment today. I'm going to talk you through what it looks like and then go through how to respond to it. So what you need to do is have the 2019 mid-year practice exam in front of you, which should be in your OneNote folder, and then hopefully you can watch this, pause it, and kind of look at exactly what the assessment looks like at the same time. The first half of this video will focus on just showing you what it's like, so you don't necessarily need it in front of you. But once you start answering, it would be good to have it. So this is a poem, which I will read through at the time. So this is kind of what a text will look like when you get it. It will have a description at the top, the title, there'll be line numbers down the side. That's what those numbers correlate to. So if you want to talk about sort of 3 or 4 lines, you don't want to copy out the entire thing, you can reference the lines. And there'll be glossed words down the bottom. That means vocab or definitions of words that the examiner thinks that you might need to know or you might not know, and it's important that you know it for the poem to make sense. Then you'll have something like this, which is your multi-choice questions. You'll see they often reference the line number, and then they've got a range of answers for you to pick from, and you'll see these ones are all worth 1 mark. You have short answer questions, and hopefully what you can note here from the previous video as well is the distribution of marks. So you'll see you can provide an example for 1 mark and then the effect for another mark. Here it's got the lines. In your copy in OneNote, I've taken out the lines just for formatting because you're not handwriting, but there'll be a different format for you guys. It'll have text boxes for you to answer them. So it gives you an idea of how much roughly you should be writing and gives you an idea of the sort of detail that you need. What you'll also notice is that some words are in bold. The idea behind this is to try and help you and point you towards key parts that you should be addressing. Then you'll have the long answer response. It's basically, as I said before, an essay paragraph, but it has a language feature or 2 language features or kind of however many you can find and talk about. So that can see there you'd fit a really long paragraph in there. So what I'm going to do is talk you through the best responses on how to respond. So we will read through the poem and then I'll talk you through it. So it's important to utilise the information on the page to help your understanding. So what I've highlighted there is the glossed words down the bottom and the description at the top. Always read the description. It is very, very handy to let you know what the text is about because sometimes it can be really hard to figure it out. So this poem is called Green Fingers. I remember your garden, how you struggled with it, how you succeeded it, and grew things well. Tree climbers, alpine suns, but now age like oxalis has infested your fingers, your mind. Your touch is less certain, your lore less sure. Your garden grows more shade. You lived your days until your days became stories, and then you lived your stories. Stories softly drowning now in the seductive whispering of weeds. And then the glossed words there is that oxalis means a flowering plant or weed, which is hard to get rid of, which I didn't know, so it's good to have the oxalis there. And lore means myths or traditions, kind of like stories that somebody old might tell you. So always utilise the information that's on the sheet in front of you. So as you read, it's important to make the meaning from the words, and I would recommend doing things like highlighting or putting in bold words or language features that stand out as you can see them, because this is going to help you when you're answering your actual response, because you're sort of seeing what your first impressions were and you're seeing what stood out, and then hopefully that can help you when you get to the long answer as well. As you can see there, I've tried to do it with I don't have a pen, so that's me trying to write on the screen, so hopefully you can see, but I saw a contrast between struggled and succeeded. I saw a simile, I saw rhyme, metaphor, stories softly, I saw alliteration, and I saw personification at the end there. So I made a note of that while I was reading. I didn't know if they'd come in handy or not. I didn't know if any of the questions would address that, but it was handy to do. Once you've sort of done your first reading of the text and you've done some simple annotations, because you've got time, it's worth considering the meaning of the text. So ask yourself, what's it about? What am I being asked to look at? What am I being asked to talk about? What can I see as a message? What can I see as maybe a theme coming through? Something that I'm meant to be learning about? you might make a note of that, and it might not be amazing. It might just be really simple ideas, but it does help you break down the text. So just start thinking, what am I getting from this? Or even just a summary. What is this poem actually about? Now what I want you to do is to go through, pause the video, go through the multi-choice and try and answer them yourself. So I've mentioned before, multi-choice are your go-to if you have any uncertainty in the text. These ones, even if you don't understand the text, they're normally sort of pretty surface level and you've just got to identify an example of something. So pause the video, give it a go. I'm assuming you've come back, you've paused the video, you've given it a go, and you just want to check through your answers. So those are the answers. Softly is an adverb. Age like oxalis. It's a simile because it has like in it. Your is a pronoun. Story softly drowning now. In that context is an alliteration. You might also think of it as a potentially a metaphor, but that's not one of the options. So you've got to pick your best option that is there. Whispering is a verb. It is an action. Next one, so what you're going to do is try and work through your answers to these. So which narrative perspective is the text told from? So think about narrative perspective. That means how is it told? Who is it told from? Whose perspective is it told from? Identify an example of repetition. Explain the effect of this language feature. So what does it help to do or show or make you think or make the image? What idea does it maybe help to show? Give it a go. And lastly, identify a sound device used in stanza 2 and provide evidence of the sound device. Pause in the video. This will probably take you about 5 minutes. Give it a go and then come back. All right, you might not have come back. You might still be here. If you are struggling a little bit before I go through the answers, I thought I'd just explain the questions a little bit more through some of the little bits that I've added on there. So narrative perspective is point of view. So if you're still stuck or you couldn't quite do that one, it would be first, second, or third person point of view. Hopefully that makes it easier to think about now. An example means an exact quote from the text. So you're going to copy it from exactly how it is written in the poem. You might reference the line numbers if you've had to take out some words. And remember, you can use ellipses, which are the 3 dots if you've taken out a big chunk in the middle of the text. Effect, as I said before, what does it have to show? What does it make you think? What are they trying to get at? Sound devices are something that impacts the way the poem or text sounds when it's read aloud. So this includes, but is not limited to, rhyme, onomatopoeia, plosives. If you don't know what they are, give them a Google. Alliteration, sibilance, anything that impacts sound. And evidence is another word for example, which is another word for a quote. So I'm just trying to expose you to the different words that might be used that have the same meaning. So if you have listened to this and you want to go back and change your answers, or you didn't have answers and you think you might know them now, take a moment, pause the video, and give that a go. If not, stick around and we'll go through the answers. All right, question 6. Which narrative perspective is the text told from? It is told from first person narrative perspective. Yes, it uses the word you and your, but it starts with an I, and the other person's story is not being told to them. That's the wrong use of to. That should just be a to with a 1 letter. 1 O, which is a trait of second person. So it doesn't, their story is not being told to them. It's somebody reflecting on somebody else in their life. They're directing it at them, but it's not them being told their life to them. Repetition. I put 3 examples there, and then the effect depends on the examples used, but I put an example there of how you explain effect and the sort of detail you should be doing. So this helps to show all the things that are being impacted by the grandparent's age. And this is the example, the second one there, your touch, your law, your garden. So the repetition of the word your. This is being impacted by the grandparent's age. Initially, it might just be their touch impacted, but over time it became their memory and stories and the garden that it impacted. It shows a range of impact. So that's a good level of detail. And question 8. Identify a sound device used in stanza 2. So it's important that you read the full question and made sure that you chose one from stanza 2. So you don't know the words there. Words. If you don't know the word stanza, it's another word for verse or paragraph. So if you'd chosen a sound device, but it wasn't from stanza 2 in the test, that would not get the mark. Okay, so it's important to read the question carefully. So Ryan, your law less sure. So if you put alliteration from the end of the poem, that would not be correct because of that. And then how to make a long answer response. So it's important to read the question carefully, and I like to highlight or underline my keywords. As I've said there in yellow, sometimes there will be things listed that you may wish to cover or discuss. So there'll be like bullet points that might say something like, you may wish to include how the grandparent is shown, how the narrator feels, the experience of old age. So there might be some bullet points which you can include, but you are not compelled to. They can be helpful, but you've just got to make sure they still link to the question. So the question that you are answering in your long answer response is explain how the writer has described their grandparent throughout the text. First step that I do when I get given something like this is I rephrase it to myself as just a simple question. So, how is the grandparent described? And then I think to myself as the simple answer, they're growing old. Cool. And now I need to go back to the text and think how I got that, what helped to show me that, and I'll read the text again to do that. So before I get ready to write it, what I want to do is use the key or focus parts of the question, and I often put those at the top of my page if I need to, or I underline or circle them or highlight them. So I've done that there in green. Go back to your multi-choice and short answers. So if you are stuck for language features, go back to them because you've already answered them and hopefully you got them right, and then you can use them as well. There is an acronym for long answer paragraphs if you need reminding, and I'll go through that. So hopefully that will help. So when you come to it and structure a response, you can think of Pete or Peter, it's just got an extra letter, or if you just want to stick with what we've already got, we've got Peel, so point, example, point, explanation, link, and the link is to your author and to yourself. The only difference here is you've got to have a technique or a language feature in there. So just before you go, when you've got your example, you want to put a language feature in there as well. So that's if you want to remember a new acronym like Pete or Peter, then go for it. Otherwise, just remember Peel or the technique. Petal. So you have a point, which is your simple answer from before. So my simple answer was they've described their grandparent as growing old. So I rephrased it as a question to myself, and that made it easier. Then you want an example, which is your quote. Then you want a technique, which is a language feature. Then you want your explanation, which is how the language feature shows your point. So how does it show them getting old? You practice this with essay paragraphs, so it's basically the same skill. And then your response or your link is what the author is trying to do, what their purpose is, what effect it had on you, that sort of thing. So you'll see that a lot of the skills are really transferable from other work that we've already done. So that's why this isn't anything to get super alarmed about. The only difference is that you put a technique, which is a language feature. Literally the only difference. And the fact that it's text you haven't seen. But you've been scaffolded or built into it with the multi-choice and the short answer, so hopefully it should be relatively simple. Okay, what I would love for you to do is to give this a go by yourself, and then come back and see some exemplars. So this should take you 10 minutes. If it takes you less, that's fine. It shouldn't take you 2 minutes. It should take you maybe 5 as a minimum. But simple answer, how have they described it? They've described their grandparent as blank. This is shown through the quote blank. The use of blank language feature helps to do this because, and then what's the author trying to do or show? Give it a whirl. Here's my examples. The writer describes the grandparent as someone who is aging and becoming weaker. This is shown through the quote, age like oxalis has infested your fingers, your mind. The use of a simile here is comparing age to a weed that is hard to get rid of. This shows the grandparent cannot escape age and it is taking over. It's a nice, simple response that would get like a 3 out of 5. A little bit more detailed, same one as before, but I put a little bit more detail there in bold. The comparison to a weed gives it a negative feeling because weeds are generally, that should say, harmful and unwanted. Aging and the effects of aging are equally unwanted and negative. That would be more like a 4. And then a 5 has a little bit more detail. So you can see that I've got bold here, and then I've got bold at the bottom here. So I've used slightly better language in this one, and I've analysed the language feature a little bit more. So the writer describes the grandparent as someone who is aging and becoming weaker. That's the same. This is shown through the quote, age like oxalis has invested your fingers, your mind. The use of the simile here is comparing age to a weed that's hard to get rid of. That's the same. Additionally, the use of the word infested gives harsh imagery, like it is fully taking over. So that's the only difference for that first bit, so a little bit more analysis of language. This shows that the grandparent cannot escape age and it is taking over. The comparison to a weed gives it a negative feeling because weeds are generally harmful and unwanted. Aging and the effects of aging are equally unwanted by both the people experiencing their wider family, who have to watch the person they know weaken. Doesn't make much sense, does it? I think the author was trying to show how upsetting this experience was through negative connotations. Age, like a weed, doesn't care where it sprouts or how it takes over. It doesn't discriminate and can have upsetting impact as a result. So that would be a 5 out of 5 response. Yeah. That's basically it. So it's got the author's purpose there. It's got a little bit of a deeper thought. So it's difficult to experience age, not just for the people experiencing it, but also their wider family, and then an author's purpose there at the end. So hopefully you can see the variations across this, and have a look at yours. If you want to have your one marked, just send it through. If you're feeling confident, put it in the channel and see if anyone else has any further contributions. Awesome, I think that's it. No, I've got final one, steps to remember. Read all the information around the text. Read the text once at first just to get a general idea, then read through and annotate. Always respond to all the questions. Don't leave them blank. You can possibly get little half marks and that might help you. Read the questions carefully. As I said before, they may ask for language features from a specific paragraph, verse, or section of lines, so it's really important to read those. Answer the long answer to yourself simply first. That creates your point. So phrase it as a question to yourself. And use language features from other parts of paper if they're relevant. They should be able to help you there. It's not super uncommon. It's not super unfamiliar. There are a lot of skills that you already know. It's just building confidence in using those. Cool.